Hello and welcome to another edition of Fox 9 Sports Live. I'm Jeff Wald with Fox 9 Digital. I've got my guy Pierre Noujaim here with me from Fox 9 Sports on TV. You'll notice this is definitely not Ahmad Hicks. He is off today, so we got Pierre serving as a pinch hitter or coming off the bench, even though I think he'd probably rather start and get more minutes, huh?
If they paid me more, maybe I would start more. So who knows? So we'll discuss that for another show. Who knows?
I promise this is not an instant replay of last week, but we're going to talk today largely about the Timberwolves and the Twins in the local sports scene. We'll start with the Timberwolves. A couple of big moves for them. One is official, one is still pending. We've got yesterday we had a news conference with Naz Reid, signed a 3-year, $42 million contract extension with the Timberwolves rather than enter free agency. Had an event at the Southside Village Boys and Girls Club in Minneapolis yesterday to talk about all that all that came with that. I guess, Pierre, just your initial thoughts when you heard about that.
To be honest, I think I might be the only person that's using this word around here, but my initial reaction was shock. I was on record as saying that I thought that there was no way Naz Reid would be back as a Minnesota Timberwolf. I genuinely thought that he was going to be gone. I thought he would seek another opportunity elsewhere. I thought he would get a better deal elsewhere, frankly. The numbers surprised me a little bit. I thought he might get a 4-year deal out on the open market. Thought he might get a little more money on the open market. And you have to look at it this way, too, for Naz Reid, the way he played last year. Really, the way he's played since he's been a Minnesota Timberwolf. He's proven that he could potentially be a starter on another team. I know that some people might disagree with that, but I think he has starter potential on another team. So for all of those reasons, I thought the writing was on the wall that Naz Reid was going to be on his way out the door. So genuinely surprised that he is back as a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I know Timberwolves fans are awfully happy. Naz's teammates should be very, very happy that he's back. Thrilled to see him back. I mean, good for him. Hey, he wants to continue his career here in Minnesota. That is up to him. Kudos to him. All the power to him. I just thought he would get a better deal elsewhere.
Sort of taking the 30,000-foot view on this whole situation. It's really a feel-good story when it comes down to it. 2019, undrafted, undrafted college free agent out of LSU, had a standout career there. Like we just mentioned, didn't get drafted. Timberwolves were able to sign him, and he showed enough in the summer league and in workouts where they signed him to a rookie deal, a multi-year rookie deal to sort of guarantee his spot on this roster. He mentioned a couple of times yesterday that like we said, the situation presented itself where he could chase more money. He could chase a starting role. He said he wanted to be here. He's been here for 4 years now, and he's gotten better every year. He had his chance last year with Cat out due to injuries. He got a lot of playing time, and he put up the best numbers of his career. So, like we said, sort of a feel-good story. And where do you think this team can go from here with him staying?
Well, first and foremost, we know that Anthony Edwards, I know that we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but we know that Anthony Edwards has signed the max extension that he possibly can, joining the likes of Tyrese Halliburton and Desmond Bane from that rookie class.
Right.
So with the money that you're looking at right now for Minnesota, the next priority, if you will, is Jaden McDaniels. What's the number going to look like with Jaden McDaniels? How much money does Jaden McDaniels believe he can make, if he ends his time here with the Timberwolves? Do you trade Jaden McDaniels if you have to? They don't want to do that. That's just
right.
We're just talking here. Trust me. The Timberwolves,
there's no steam out there. Trust us.
They don't want to trade Jaden McDaniels. But listen, you're already you have 3 guys now making max money. Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards.
Right.
They're making max money. So where else can you possibly fit Jaden McDaniels into a contract that makes sense for him and makes sense for the team? So that's the number crunching and the hoops that Tim Connolly's going to have to jump through. But I know first and foremost that Jaden McDaniels is a very high priority for this organization, and I know they're going to do everything they can to keep him here. What is the number, though? What can it be in our mind? Because now with the NBA, with the new structure of contracts and tiers in terms of how teams can dip into the tax, that's the question you're going to have to ask yourself, is what the number is going to be with Jaden McDaniels.
Right, and going back to Naz for a second, he mentioned a couple of key talking points from yesterday that he mentioned that he's comfortable here. That was part of the reason why he wanted to come back rather than test free agency. He likes his teammates, he likes the organization, and like I said, he just has a comfort spot with this organization, so that'll help. And Chris Finch and Tim Connolly both mentioned yesterday, which I thought was pretty interesting, that although the trend in the NBA right now seems to be smaller, faster, guard-oriented play or guard-dominated play, he goes, hell, we might see 3 bigs at one time on the court next year. I think that's a stretch personally, but they've got the talent to potentially do that. What do you think about that?
I don't believe that for a second. I really don't. I mean, show me a lineup that would make sense to have Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, and Karl Anthony Towns on the floor at the same time. Last I checked, especially like you mentioned, a more guard-oriented league this has become. When's the last time you've ever seen a center guard a point guard? Or
True.
been able to stay in front of a point guard? I mean, it's just not going to. Now, granted, Naz is very nimble on his feet. I've seen Naz Reid move around. I mean, he can keep up with some guys and stuff like that. Rudy cannot. Karl Anthony Towns cannot. I mean, if they have to come out and guard a guy and then backpedal, I mean, they're in trouble.
Right.
So I don't foresee any kind of lineup like that. All due respect to Chris Finch, don't foresee any type of lineup that would involve three bigs. But it's just I think this team. When I look back to this team, I know I'm going to derail us here for just a quick second.
Fine. That's what YouTube's for.
Allow me to do that if we could. I keep thinking back, and I look at this team, especially last year, and I'm looking at the way this team is structured this year, and I keep thinking, why don't I like this team all that much? When I look at it on paper, outside of Anthony Edwards, there's nothing about the structure and the formation of the way this team is built where I'm like, this team I think can do some damage. And yet I keep reminding myself that with Karl Anthony Towns missing over 50 games last year, and the fact that they lost to, I believe it was 7 games against lottery teams last year, 7 or 8 games, if you win 4 or 5 of those games...
I'd say a lot more than it should have been.
Yeah, if you win 4 or 5 of those games, even without Karl Anthony Towns, that would have been 45 or 46 wins, and that would have made you a 4 seed in the West, which is crazy to think about for me. But so when you think about Karl Anthony Towns, if he obviously plays more than he did last year, hopefully the injury bug has kind of been put in place for him for the time being, and you have a full season of Karl Anthony Towns.
Right.
Suddenly I'm thinking, can this team win 50 games next year? They might.
That's sort of why I want to see the Cat-Gobert combination come together more. I mean, there's been so much talk about this offseason about what's going to happen. Are they going to move Cat? Are they going to try and accumulate draft capital? Are they going to try and accumulate starting players for Karl Anthony Towns? I think he's staying, and I think it's because they want to see how that experiment with Gobert will work. Kind of moving on, we touched on it a couple times here already. Anthony Edwards, while it's not official from the team yet, he has agreed in principle to a max extension worth, I think it's up to $260 million if he hits certain incentives. I think the guaranteed number at this point is $217 million, which would be just shy of the supermax extension that Cat's going to start in 2024. This is clearly, to me, it's kind of similar to a move that the Vikings are going to have to make with Justin Jefferson. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to give a guy max money to keep him around. Anthony Edwards has made it pretty clear that he likes it here. He's the guy that gets the ball when the game's on the line, with all due respect to Cat. He's just simply not that guy right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's trending towards Anthony Edwards being the face of this franchise. So with that in mind, pay the man. And that's exactly what the Timberwolves did. So he's going to be around for, I believe it's another 5 years after this year, which is a huge sigh of relief to Timberwolves fans. Not that we thought he was going to go anywhere.
Well,
I mean, they were going to get it done.
You know how this league is. You never know when somebody demands a trade. Somebody can demand a trade at any moment. We're not saying that's going to happen. I know Wolves fans are hoping that won't happen. But for now, yes, this is very, very good. Very good news for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
The only thing I hope to see moving forward here is some sort of evolution with this offense with Chris Finch. It just seemed like every time last year when a game was on the line or when you were in the playoffs, it seemed like the offense was give the ball to Anthony Edwards and get the hell out of the way.
Right.
Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. He can create plays on his own. Don't get me wrong. He can create plays for his teammates, but let's have some semblance of an offensive flow, and let's not let one guy try to dominate the game when the moment is huge, even though Anthony Edwards loves the huge moment, as we've discussed multiple times before. Just kind of your general thoughts.
Well, the one thing that still concerns me, I mean, even in the beginning of the season last year after a game, I think we were only about 10, 12 games into the season last year, and Anthony Edwards was on record saying, I can't recall if Rudy Gobert wasn't playing in a game or if Karl Anthony Towns was already hurt by then, but Anthony Edwards made it known that when there isn't a big in the lane, it's a lot easier for him to attack the glass. And the way Anthony Edwards attacks the glass reminds me a lot of the way Dwayne Wade would attack the glass early on in his career. Just that aggression to get to the cup, to get to the free throw line. And when you have 2 7-footers in the middle, I know Cat is not really going to be making his living in the paint a lot, especially with Rudy on the floor at the same time. But it just feels, I don't know where the flow is coming from. It almost feels like it's bogged down. And if Anthony Edwards gets sealed off, top of the key up, and he can't drive, what is this offense looking like? I don't know. That's why I'm so hesitant, and that's why I'm so unsure of how I feel about this team. Because while I like the pieces, I like the names, I like the faces, I like the teams, I was like, I don't know how this team really fits together.
Right.
That's really what we're looking for, right? Like, how are they going to fit together?
And regardless, it's a great story for a kid out of Georgia. Not exactly a college basketball hotbed, but a great story for Anthony Edwards. Now he gets his financial security. He has plenty of money for his Lake Minnetonka home. Good for him.
Yeah.
We've already touched a little bit on Cat. Obviously, the Wolves need to also figure out a way to pay Jaden McDaniels going forward to keep him here.
Yeah, that's really the big question in the offseason.
This guy is headed to Vegas here soon for the NBA Summer League. So why don't you just give us some general thoughts on what you're hoping to see out there?
Well, what I'm hoping to see is no injuries. That's for sure. I mean, that's the last thing anybody wants to see. I'm gonna actually, I will be taking time to try to catch up with some members of the Timberwolves brass. Hopefully, we're able to sit down and chit chat with them for a little bit during my time in the Vegas Summer League. Also, I'm going to be making my way over to Oklahoma City and kind of poke my head in to check out Chet Holmgren and see how he's doing, the Minneapolis Academy product. I know a lot of people are very eager to see how he's going to do, especially after missing all last year with the injury in his what would have been his rookie season. It will be his rookie season now with Oklahoma City. So I'll be there for three or 4 days and try to make my way around and try not to let the craps table distract me on my way to the Thomas and Mack Center. But Summer League is always a fun time. I think this is my fourth or fifth time out there.
I figured I'd let you take the gambling route there. I didn't know if we were going to talk about that or not. And, of course, maybe get your Wembanyama fix, too.
Well, let's hope he plays. I know there's a lot of people. I was told that I think this is the most credentials that were issued for an NBA Summer League this season. I have to imagine a lot of that has to do with Victor Wembanyama. So if he plays the first game, great. I don't know how much he'll play after that. I know the Spurs want to protect their investment, and I don't blame them whatsoever for doing so, but hopefully we see him for at least more than one game.
Correct. And with that, let's transition. We're going to talk Twins baseball here. Obviously, we're in the heart of the summer. We're right before the All-Star break. The Twins are somehow managing to stay relevant before we switch to football season here in just over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I love a good cliched players-only closed-door meeting. I love them.
Why not?
They had one after getting swept at Atlanta last week. About this time last week, me and Ahmad were talking about what the hell's going on with this baseball team right now. And since they are 5-1 after sweeping the Royals, they have a 2-game lead, the AL Central. I know it's baseball, but what do we think of this latest upswing?
Well, I'm not getting too excited because, like you mentioned, it's the Royals. That's
why should they apologize for having to play the worst team in baseball?
They shouldn't. They shouldn't. But I think there's context to everything. And at the same time, I think it's an overreaction to have a closed-door meeting when you get swept by the best team in baseball.
Correct.
I thought, listen, Atlanta is a spectacular baseball team. There's no shame in losing to Atlanta. I like going on the road into Baltimore, a team that's been playing well this season, going and taking 2 out of 3 out of Baltimore. I thought that was terrific. I thought that was a great result for them. That gets me a lot more excited than a 3-game sweep over the Royals, but you take care of business at home. The one thing with this team that still doesn't worry me very much, and it's not the fact that they play in a terrible division. How many times have we seen this team in the past been able to hit, but the pitching has never been able to keep up with the hitting?
And now you're flipping the script.
And now the script seems to have been flipped at this point. And if you're counting on one to come around more than the other, I always believe hitting is what will eventually come around more than pitching. Because especially when you're halfway through the season, when you look at your pitching staff, especially your starting rotation, you know what you are by now.
Right.
There's no hiding it. So I don't expect the guy to suddenly flip a switch, and suddenly be an all-star post all-star break.
Right.
So if it's between pitching and hitting that I'm waiting and hoping to see comes around, it would be hitting, and we've kind of seen that the last week.
A quick note: I was actually at last Friday's game at Camden Yards. Quick family vacation. Got a chance to see we stayed for about 7 innings or so. You could just sort of tell among the players, just the body language on the field, that they had a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder. Byron Buxton goes yard. Joey Gallo goes yard. They had 2 other home runs on the night and an 8-1 win. And you could just sort of sense that maybe that set the tone to kind of get things shifted in the other direction. Because, in that series against the Braves, they were 0 for 23 with runners in scoring position. They got outscored 13-3. They got shut out in their last game. All sorts of negative vibes going on.
Struck out a lot earlier. I mean, this team would strike out, 12, 14, 16 times a game, earlier in the season, which was just horrendous.
So since that cliched meeting, they're now 5-1. They sweep the Royals. They're now 2 games above 500. They have a 2-game lead in the division, although right now it's July. I mean, we can't really talk about a division race to the end of August.
No.
But the feel-good story for last night, Pablo Lopez, complete game shutout, goes 100 pitches. Maybe most importantly, gives the bullpen a night of rest.
Yeah.
And they also have an off day today, so they have 2 days rest going into the series against the Orioles here this weekend. Great to see a guy like Pablo Lopez do his thing, especially so much talk now that the lineup has struggled has been about getting him and trading Luis Ariz to the Marlins, and now that Ariz is leading all of Major League Baseball in hitting.
Yeah.
He's chasing 400.
Yeah, right.
Not a great look when the guy that you traded him for to bring here, ever since he signed his contract extension, just seemed like he was kind of hovering around. I don't want to say mediocrity because that's a little bit aggressive, but he hasn't been as dominant as we hoped he would be. Obviously, everything changed last night. What did you make of that sweep over the Royals?
Well, it's taking care of business. That's all it really is. You got a team that's far inferior to you, especially in a divisional opponent. Now that they're really a threat, they're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the AL Central. But I want to see when you got teams that you're supposed to beat, you got to beat them, right. And they did just that. Take care of business. Build positive momentum up, and like you said, you don't have to apologize for playing the Royals. You play who's on the schedule, and that's the way it is. So any way this team can gain some positive momentum, because injury has played a big role in with this team at the time. Royce Lewis is now on the 10-day. Hopefully they get him back at some point because he's just been absolutely outstanding for them. Ever since he got called up. So, I know this is probably not the answer a lot of people want to hear, but I'm kind of middle of the road with this team. I'm not thrilled that they're in first place, especially with the way they've played, but I don't think they're as bad as people want to make them out either. So, I'll hopefully there's a second half run in them that makes you a little convinced, because let's be honest, if they win 83 games or 84 games and they win the division,
what does it matter?
Well, exactly. Yeah. What does it matter?
Right.
Especially if you get swept by whoever maybe it's Tampa, or Texas, who knows?
That's been the ongoing frustration with this team is that I'm 41, and this is probably the best starting pitching I've seen from a franchise,
quite some time.
Arguably in my lifetime. Obviously since they won a World Series in '91, but it seems like you're almost letting it go to the side because situational hitting hasn't been there. The last 10 days or so, it's gotten better.
Let's not forget. I want to point something out real quick. Let's not forget Carlos Correa is still dealing with the plantar fasciitis.
Yeah.
That I know that was reported. What was it, 3 weeks ago?
Yep.
Something like 3 or 4 weeks ago. That's the type of injury that doesn't really go away.
Not unless you have surgery.
Exactly. Not unless you have surgery or unless you give it an inordinate amount of rest, which he's not able to do because you play 162 games. So let's not forget that is still bothering Carlos Correa, and he's still going out there doing his best trying to produce for this team. Some days it's been good. Some days it's been, we expect more of a guy who's getting paid a truck ton of money, but let's keep that in mind as well with Carlos Correa.
And maybe a sign that the Twins are, I don't want to say not respected enough among division leaders, but maybe there's a reason why that they only have one All-Star. It's Sonny Gray this year. He's the number 2 starter behind Pablo.
Congratulations to Sonny, too.
The Twins have an All-Star. Great for him. It's his 3rd All-Star game, first with the Twins. He's just been, in a rotation full of great performances this year, he's been by far the most consistent in my mind.
Yes, I agree. 100%.
So cool for him to be able to get a chance to go to the Midsummer Classic while the rest of the guys will get a little bit of a break next week. And I guess from there we'll just transition right into, we've been talking about the lineup a little bit. You mentioned Royce Lewis, tough break with him last Saturday. He goes out with an oblique injury. I believe Rocco said he's out up to 6 weeks. That puts him out to roughly mid-August, which is a big loss for this team. You're talking about a guy who everyone knows the story by now, two ACL tears.
Yeah.
Finally healthy this year, and he was leading the Twins in hitting through his 26 games. Just provided a huge spark, not only at the plate, but with his ability to play the hot corner there at third. Now he's out, and you're starting to see a few other guys step up. You saw Joey Gallo have some better at-bats. Byron Buxton's back. They had multiple home runs here against the Royals. You started to see that spark back after it disappeared there for about 3 weeks.
And let's not forget Jorge Polanco also still on the shelf.
I almost forgot about him until I heard someone talking about him on the radio the other day. I'm like, oh yeah, he still plays for the Twins.
Right, correct. Yeah, and that would be. Could you imagine though if you have a lineup that has both Polanco and Lewis back in it, and you look at it up and down with Buxton and Correa, and some of the ways that some of these other guys have been hitting. If it's working, that's a pretty good lineup.
Right.
That's a pretty good lineup.
I only wonder how much longer this whole experiment with Buxton at DH can last, because
That's a great point.
Rocco said a few weeks ago during a pregame availability, he said if he was healthy enough to play center field, he'd be in the outfield. That scares me a little bit because, yeah, the knee is probably still a little bit of a concern, but it's like, are you that terrified that you put him out in center field, he's going to get hurt, that you just strictly play him DH and that you kind of pigeonhole yourself in the lineup?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, that's certainly what it seems like.
Yeah.
I mean, and how can you? I don't really blame him for feeling that way. I mean, I would be a little gun shy about it as well. I mean, Michael A. Taylor, all due respect to him, he can cover some ground out there. He really can. But Byron Buxton can do some things out in center field that not a lot of other people in this world can do. So, yeah, I share that similar concern, but at the same time too, I'd much rather have him in the lineup DHing than out because he just ran into the wall again trying to make a diving catch.
And you say that now, and that's where Michael A. Taylor's been one of the sneaky good acquisitions of the offseason.
Yeah.
He's been a stalwart in center field there. He's made almost no mistakes I can't think of any glaring mistakes he's
defensively,
made.
I think he's been a very solid center fielder for them.
And he's got a decent bat, he's got some speed, and he's covering ground out there for you.
Yeah, he is.
So with that, we will wrap this up. We want to thank you for tuning in today and send Pierre off to Vegas. Hopefully you have some success at the card or the craps or whatever table you choose.
I did last time I was there, so let's hope we keep that momentum going.
And we have a little over 3 weeks away until Vikings training camp. So soak in the sun, get to the golf course, get your boat on the lake, do whatever you need to do, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.